She also hit me with a case of the four P's.
Oh, that's
Which,
a good
if
one.
you don't know, case of the four P's is piss poor prior planning.
Hey there, and welcome to the brand new episode of the Better Merch, Better Marketing podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kirby Hasseman, and joining me, as always, is Jade Kreider from Colorado. Jade, how are you right now?
I'm doing so good. I've got my pup next to me. I have another pup in the other room that I'm dog sitting for. It might get noisy. We're having a good time with it.
Yeah, I love that you've warned the audience in advance that
Everybody
things.
knows that when
Yeah,
17 barks happen, we're rolling with
yeah, that's
it.
exactly right. That's exactly right. It's so funny because, I think so many times when you're talking about different things like this, I said you're in Colorado, and then I was like, and how are you right now? Because I'm thinking, oh, you're in Colorado right now. Maybe that stays the same. Maybe it doesn't. So if you haven't, I'm just rambling. I apologize. Welcome to the Better Merch, Better Marketing podcast. If you've never been here before, this is the official podcast of Hasseman Marketing. Our goal is to help you elevate your marketing and your merch game, and we're going to have some fun along the way. The big thing I would tell you about today, just to remind you, is we have set the date for our customer show. It's way out, but we do. You can register now. So we are excited about that. We do this every year. The show is September 23rd. It's kind of a customer appreciation and user show. We bring in vendors from all over the country to show you some of the coolest merch. And if you go to show.hassemanmarketing.com, you can register for free. I would encourage you to do so. We do some extra special stuff for the people who do that, so you can check it out.
I put a lot of hours into planning for that event and would love for you to see all my hard work come to light and honestly come tell me how awesome it is. That's what I would like you to do. Please and thank you.
Well, again, you've only just begun. Like, it's in September and we're recording this and it's February. We got more work to do, but it is something we do spend some time on and we do enjoy it. So yes.
One of my favorites.
So, all right. So let's dive in today, Jade. We've got several different topics that I'm kind of pumped about talking about. And we actually, the first topic, I'll kind of start us off. This was something where you and I were having a conversation organically, just in business, right? And the calls we do on Zoom, each and every day. And I'm not sure how we wandered into the topic, but one of the topic today is sort of advice we've gotten that has stuck with us. And maybe it was stuff we didn't want to hear at the time, but we needed to hear. Yeah. Right. And so, we as we did it, we were like kind of going back and forth. We're like, ooh, this would be a great topic for the podcast. So we could talk about some different advice we gotten at different times in our life and that we needed to hear, and it kind of stuck with us. So I thought I'd have you go first. How about that?
Wonderful. My first one it was actually one that I think Kirby really liked. There's a TikToker that is going viral right now for cleaning your house and getting everything cleaned up. And one of the things that she says a lot is a body in motion stays in motion and a body at rest stays at rest. And it's such an obvious thing. We learned it in physics. I get it. But like hearing it when you're like, oh, if I just get up and make the bed and do a little laundry, suddenly my work day is more productive. And you're like, duh. Yeah. But like, it was one of those where she said it and it just kind of hit you in the chest and you're like, yeah, if I just start the day off right, if I start, I'll start. But if I lay on the couch, I'm probably laying on the couch all day long. So it was a good one that I really liked.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me too. And I was like, oh, that's really good. And it is the reason I think sometimes that I'm so adamant about getting up early and doing things early before my day gets away from me. So I think that's a really good one. And before we started recording, I said, I could probably have 100 of these. I'm not going to do that, I promise. But I think if you're open to it, especially with content today and depending on who you follow and all that sort of thing, I listen to people who are constantly pushing interesting thoughts and tough love and challenging thoughts into my brain. Ed Milet, Alex Ramosi, Cody Sanchez, John Acuff, Gary V.
We talked about him last week.
Right. I listened to them but they're constantly giving me advice that I'm like, ooh, that's really good. But so I reverted back to two pieces of advice that I heard when I was really young that stuck with me. And that's the way I went. So the first one was from, it's funny because I remember where I was. I'm in the basement of Grace United Methodist Church when I was a kid. And Archie Griffin was the speaker. And Archie is the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner in college football.
Okay.
He ran. He was a running back for Ohio State,
I
and he's
believe
a
you.
little guy. Okay, so he's probably not.
Hmm.
He's probably my height. Okay,
Okay.
but one of the things he said was, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And I was a little guy, right? Like, so I'm listening to this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, ooh. And I think it still speaks to me in the idea that it doesn't matter if we're going up against a bigger competitor. It doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
who you're competing against. It's about the fight in you. It's about the ability that you have to show up. And man, I love that. That's that's
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those things that I was like, doesn't matter as long as I don't quit, as long as I don't, like, that's the piece that stuck with me. And I mean, literally through my tennis career, through business,
Mm-hmm.
that's one that I still think about.
Which is it's a very timely one because the dog that I'm dog sitting for is sometimes she's got a big fight in her, and oh, my thumbs up. She's half the size of my dog, and my dog is scared of her. So I think that's a
That's funny.
hilarious one to use this week. So I really like
Okay.
that. Everyone.
Okay.
My second one was a very much a tough love. I heard it and went, "Ouch!" Yeah, it is. It's not that hard. You're making it that hard. And
Mm,
it's an obvious one, but like just as simple as like your brain is making it seem like laundry is not that hard.
mm.
Apparently, I
Jeez.
have all the filters today. Goodness gracious.
That's really exciting.
Laundry is not that hard. You're making it out to be that it's a bigger thing than it is in real life. That first sales call that you're making is
Mm,
not that hard. You're making it that hard. And so I
yeah.
thought that was one that I was like, ooh, you're right, but dang it, that stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really good because I think sometimes it's different people are different, right? So, and what was the stupidest sentence ever. But what I mean by that is, like, some people really struggle to start and some people struggle to finish, right?
Hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of times where if you start on the treadmill,
Hmm.
it gets easier to do the next whatever. If you
Yeah,
make the first sales call, the first one's the hardest. After that's
right.
actually you've started the momentum. And so I think that's great advice. That's
That
really
was
good.
one that really it did really hit me in the chest, and it was as I was starting to make sales calls and stuff, and I was like, oof,
Yeah.
you're right, but you didn't have to hurt my feelings. Goodness
Yeah.
gracious. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah. So my next one is, so again, back to, I remember, it was after a tennis tournament when I was in high school,
Hmm.
and my dad and I would travel to these together, and we're sitting there, and I don't remember exactly the context leading up to it, but he sort of said something along the lines of, "You can't control what happens to you. You can only control your reaction to what happens to you." And then, in typical Rod fashion, he was like, "That's deep. You should write that shit down." Literally, this is how that went.
I believe
And
that
but
came out of his mouth. I can hear
yeah,
it.
but I will say, I at that time really struggled with my temper. Like I broke rackets.
Hmm.
And so I would allow the thing that I couldn't control to control me, right?
Hmm.
And so, and I think that if you maybe talk to my siblings or people who knew me back then, most people don't think I have a bad temper now,
Hmm.
because I've gained control over it, because I've gotten
Hmm.
control of the time and the space in between, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I still get frustrated and angry. I just don't break the tennis racket anymore
I was
because
gonna say
I've
you're
gained
good at
control.
walking away now.
Right.
I don't know if you were back then, but now you do a good
I
job
was
walking
not.
away.
I
So.
was terrible at it. And so I say that because I remember where I was, and I remember it was something I needed to hear. So that's that
Hmm.
one.
My last one is less of like a saying or like a quote
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but it was again, I'm going back to kind of like tough love is what my brain was
Yeah.
kind of thinking. Um, and mine is specifically a person. I have a new friend that I've made here at this in Colorado, I should say. My husband's
Yeah. Where do
military,
you
so at
live?
this base is what I say. But she's the best, and she is the best friend for tough love, and she is one of my people that I can go to her and go, okay, am I valid or am I being really dramatic? And she's one who will, and I am known to be dramatic. If you know me at all, that's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
big shocker. But she is somebody who, in the moment, can say it in a nice way, in a positive way of like, you're blowing this so out of proportion. And I know that's a person, but having that someone that I can go to
Mm-hmm.
and just be like, is this me? Is it me? Like, be honest with me. And she will. She'll give me that honest answer of like, yeah, I think you're taking this way too personally, but like, I understand why you're taking it personally. but you're taking it way too personally. It's not about you. Move on with your life. And that's
Yeah.
good sometimes to hear.
Oh, it's super powerful. So I'd give you credit too, because regardless of how good she is at saying it, if you're not open to it, that's going to be a
It's fair.
problem,
Well,
right?
thank you.
Like,
It's something I'm
yeah,
working on because I'm not good at that normally. So
yeah,
I can't hear it from my sister or my mom, but a good friend outside of my family, like that's the one I can hear it from and not take it super personally. So having
yeah,
somebody that you can have.
and I aspire to be that person. I don't know, like I have people in my life, I can think of them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
remember vividly, this was years ago, where he was an older guy and he was training for a triathlon, and I was in North Carolina for the weekend, and I was like, "Hey, can I come with you on your run?" And he was like, no, you won't be able to keep up. And his wife was like, "How dare you?" And I was like, I took it like, "Oh, he's right. I'm Steve.
Yeah.
He's eating garbanzo beans and I'm drinking beer. He's right."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, but it's like not everybody can give you that, but there are certain people in your life who can just say a truth to you that you're like, "Hey, what are you gonna do?"
Well, and I have a respect for those kind of people, and it's something I like strive to
big
have in
time.
myself because they're also protecting their own peace in that moment of like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
I'm not listening to you complain about this all day.
Yeah.
Check yourself right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Let's just
but
not.
they can say it in a way that isn't. I'm not running slower just because you run along with me. But like,
Yeah. Yep.
anyways, and they can just do
100%.
it in a way that doesn't hurt, and that's
Yeah.
impressive. It's something I strive to have.
Yeah, and usually they're very direct but kind, and so I
Yes,
heard that as a term as kind candor, and I'm
that's a good
like,
one.
yeah. So anyway, I think these were good. These were
Yeah.
I hope this was helpful to those of you listening. If you have any that you heard something recently,
Oh
if
yeah.
there's something that grabs you, man, throw them in the comments. I love kind of reading. Like I said, I am a person who is constantly looking for ways to grow and kind of learn. And so, yeah, throw them in the, if you've got a piece of advice that's kind of shook you and made you better, I want to hear it.
Yes. Let's hear it.
All right.
The next one, we're going back to merch because that is why we are here. Today, we are going to talk about how to use merch to elevate your next event. No matter what that event is, whether you're talking golf outings, you have an employee appreciation event like we do it in September. If you have anything going on, just kind of tips for using specific merch to elevate your specific event. You want to start us off, Kirby?
Yeah. So I've just got a couple points really, and we can discuss these. So the thing that struck me, think about this in the form of like a movie or in a song. Okay.
Okay.
So if you're hearing a live band and they play a song, the middle, like you don't remember the middle. You remember how they start and you remember how it finishes. And so if you're looking to have an impact with an event, let's say it's a golf event. I think you mentioned a golf event, but whatever that event is, how do you make them feel when they walk in? And how do you make them feel when they leave? I actually think that's one of my favorite questions. I think I heard this from a guy in our industry, Bobby Leahy, and he said, when you're thinking about merch and you're like, I'm going to do the cheap item or I'm going to do this, ask yourself, how do I want them to feel? Because it really does, when they receive it, how will they feel is a great, it makes you shift your thinking, right?
I love
and
that.
So, yeah. So when you are talking about an event, and we talk about that about our events, like what do they smell? What do they hear? What, how do we make them feel when they walk in? And in the context of this, I was like, okay, how are we doing on the way out? We probably need to do better. Like, so
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So how do you make them feel when they show up? How do you make them feel when they leave? That was number one.
I love that one. Mine is it's a similar kind of where it's I'm talking about the vibe as a whole, and there's ways to use promo in that obviously. But having the staff that is working, your team, your crew all on board. If you're using things that make them feel, I talked about it on the last episode of using like the fun jackets and the fun shoes, whether it's the friendship bracelets, something that your staff is like, check out how fun this is. And they feel like it's a fun, like crew and like gang and like so fun. Finding a way to get your staff excited so that when people walk in, it kind of helps with the overall just vibe of the energy of the room. And I think there's a lot of ways when you have a really cool cup and your staff is excited about it, or they're all wearing these super fun jackets that you guys got just made for this event, or the custom shoes.
The
obviously I'm
shoes are
clearly on a
sweet.
kick
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah.
But just different things like that that like get your staff excited because then the people that come in are excited. It sets the vibe. It sets the mood for the whole event, I think.
Yeah. I love that you said that you're on a kick about shoes, but that's fine.
Oh, that does work. But like Kirby was dressed up as Wonka at our show last year. And it was such a fun thing. People came in, they're like, oh my God, it's Wonka. I mean, it was blown way more than I thought it would be out of proportion in the best way possible. But
It's
it set
wonderful.
the vibe. It was so fun. And like, I
Yeah.
think something like that can be a fun way to just
Yeah. If you
elevate it.
get your team excited,
Hmm.
whether that's through merch or whatever, then they're
Hmm.
gonna that will translate. I like that a lot.
That's one that
um,
Common Skew, which is one of our in
oh
our
yeah.
industry, they do a really great job. Their team makes you feel like you're part of a family the minute you walk through that door. And so that's where that was inspired from is they do such a good job of being excited about the things that they're giving you and doing. So
Okay, so I love that because that's going to lead to my next one, and I didn't mean for
perfect.
this to happen, but you're right. Common Skew does a really good job. That whole team does.
Hmm.
Um, so mine is model your favorite events. So
Mm.
whether it's a golf outing, like, and again, I was
Hmm.
thinking of it through that lens. But
Hmm.
one of the things I was talking to Mark Graham about this, and Mark, and he
Yes.
talked about one of the things that they do with their
Hmm.
events is they train up their team to look for
Hmm.
people who look lonely, who are
Oh, I love that.
like, and to go engage. Love it,
Yeah.
right? But
Uh-huh.
the other side is true. So, I think that's a great thing for any event, right? Like,
Genius.
that's
Yeah.
good.
Hmm.
Make them feel a part of it, make them feel special. They'll think
Yeah.
the event is better. So, I think that's just good
Hmm.
advice. From a merch perspective, I think you can do it the same way. I mean, they
Hmm.
are the
They're
kings
pros.
and queens
Yeah.
of doing merch in our industry. But if you've been to an event, a golf outing, I keep coming back to that, and they're
Yeah,
like, oh,
because it's a
they
good
did
example.
Bluetooth speakers that fit in the cup holders that played
Oh
music on all the
yeah.
golf carts. And you're like, oh my
Uh-huh.
God, that was amazing.
Hmm.
Model your favorite events and look for ways that you
Hmm.
can, because, they say there's no original ideas. So
That's
look
super
for
fun.
those things where you were like, hey, they made me feel special. Hey, that was fun. Hey, this was
Uh-huh.
like, we did sorry, I did not mean to go here. It's not in my notes. This just popped in my
Uh-huh.
head. But we have done a couple different events where we did hit it to win it at golf outings,
Yes.
where they did branded merch on the greens. They didn't block the thing to the hole as if you guys are going to
Uh-huh.
hit a hole in one. Whatever, I've seen you play. But all joking aside, that you leave that open so they can get their hole in one if they actually have it. But if they hit it, they get it. And it's like, you could do that for free, which is what we've done. You could do it like, hey, you pay $5 and you donate to a local charity.
Hmm.
That was an idea of somebody else's that I was like,
Mm.
oh my God, I love it. So when you see something that you love, incorporate that into yours.
Yeah, that's super cool. And also you were saying that, and one of the things that came into my mind was I did see somebody did speakers for everybody for a golf outing, and then
Mm.
they created a playlist. So
Oh,
everyone was
love
listening
that.
to the same playlist in each of their
That's fun.
carts as they like drove. And I was like, oh, that's
That's
genius. That's
Yeah,
all day long.
love that one.
My next one is going to be, it's kind of a general thing, but it's something that people underestimate, and it's the signage that you use.
Mm,
Um,
great.
and it's
Yeah.
something that can be a missed mark because if people don't know why you're having the event, if they don't know what's going on,
Where
you're
to go?
missing a mark. If you're
Yeah.
outside at a golf outing, have a tent with your logo on it. Make it all out. Like if you're going to do it and go hard and make it a fun thing. Have the signs everywhere, have the stuff everywhere, and put your
Yeah, I
message
like that.
out as much as you can, whether you're raising money, whether you're thanking them, whether put your message out anywhere and everywhere you can. I think that can make a really big difference.
That's fun. And my final point was over communicate and appreciate. And you can
Yeah.
do that through the signage, right? Like,
Yeah. That
right.
works.
So,
We're on the same page today.
yeah. But again, I think in advance of the event, you almost
Yeah.
can't over communicate whatever that event is. What's the address? Because what happens is people get it and they either delete it, they move it into a folder. Like, you want to
Yes.
move that, like, why you're doing it, where you're doing it, what's the address, what's the time, put that to the top of the inbox as you get closer to
Mm-hmm.
the event. And then on the other side, just appreciate, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I think usually often you want to utilize these events to strengthen relationships, however that
Mm-hmm.
looks. And so one of the ways you can do that is just show appreciation on a regular basis. So I came up
Mm-hmm.
with over communicate, over appreciate.
And if you want to see how to do an event right, no, I'm just kidding. But we do work really hard to show you all the cool things you can do at your event. So come to ours.
All right. So
All
next
right.
up, we talked about AI. AI is a hot topic in every industry, and it should be. Actually, as we're recording this, the Delivering Marketing Joy from this week. That was the whole episode, was it from the guy who wrote the book AI for Dummies. And so it was for me. But our topic today is just how we're utilizing AI every day, to hopefully give you guys some insight into ways you can utilize it as well. So your idea on the topic, Jade, so you lead us off.
Cool. I think AI is one of those things that, especially if you don't know where to start, it can be extremely overwhelming. So I thought this was a fun one just to say the realistic
Yeah.
ways that, like, I use it all the time, almost every day, probably.
Yep.
One of the big ones is for Instagram captions, which sounds silly, but I will go on and say, hey, write me 10 Instagram captions for me. I'm 20-year-old promo merch girl. You can literally type it in and it'll come up. It'll give you emojis. It'll give you hashtags. It'll do all of it. And then I just copy and paste it. I mean, it's such a silly thing that can make your life a little bit easier if you're trying to boost yourself on social media, that you don't have to think about it. You just let them do it, make sure the grammar is correct, and then post it. I love using it for that specifically.
Yeah, and I'd written ideating content, right? Like, so same kind of thing is like, give me 10 posts, I'll use 2 or 3, or I'll customize them. I do it less for my own stuff, but when I'm doing them for other folks, so like for choosekashogton.com,
right?
For when I'm doing stuff, I because I have to get myself in a different headspace, get like 10 or 12 different ideas, I narrow them down and I'll utilize them. So I like that. The other thing that I've been using it for is synopsis. So like I will give it like, well, I mean, like, so Thirsty Thursday, by the time this drops, we'll have had one yesterday. And so I give it a great amount of details. I've preloaded it with other articles, background, so that it has our voice a little bit. And then it helps me write up the blog posts for content that I can feed it. And I don't feel bad about that because it's our content. We've created it in advance and we're utilizing it to help us kind of use it on different platforms. And so that's one of the ways that I'm using it.
Yeah. This one is a little bit different. Truthfully, it is not even marketing related. I just thought it was a fun thing that I saw somebody else do and thought it was genius. There's 2 of them. There's 2 levels to it. Number 1, AI wrote my workout plan for the next 3 months of my life. Every day of my life is planned out for, I'm attempting to do some calisthenics type stuff. It created it for me. I have a 3-month-long workout. It tracks it, the whole ordeal. Simple as that. It's like a Word document and they made it great. And then also meal planning to go along with that. They planned all my meals. I don't have to think about it. I can type in and tell them what ingredients I have in the kitchen and it makes me a recipe. And I think that's understated. I know it's not promo related, but it's one of those that I didn't think to use it for and then was like, this is the best.
Yeah, really
I don't have to use my brain. It's just done. So that's my next one.
Yeah, so I interviewed Russ Henneberry for Delivering Marketing Joy. If you're interested in AI, I would definitely check out that episode. It's not me. It was just really good. And this is from him, so I want to give credit. But he said, people think about the ideation, and I can give you some websites about that. But he's like, actually, one of the most underutilized things of AI when it comes to marketing, let's say you're creating a marketing plan, or is to ask AI what's missing. AI is better at seeing it than humans. So like you put together a plan, an event, and you go, okay, here's the entirety of it. What's missing? And that's one of the underutilized tools or ways to use that tool. And that was one I was like, ding, that's really good.
Yeah, that was really good. One other way that we use it, and this is kind of at our office, I truthfully am not the queen of this as much, however, I think it's a good one, is to get art inspiration. They don't necessarily do the art, but they give you ideas and it gets the ball rolling, and then you can kind of personalize it from there, and you can give them the wackiest of ideas and it will come up with something really unique and cool. And of course, you'll have to tweak it and make it your own and do all the things, but it is a great starting point, and I think that can be a really cool way to use it.
Yeah, Canva has AI tied into it right now, but is it Ideogram? I want to say it's ideogram.ai. That's a website we use that it's free. And it's exactly like that, where the more detail you can give it, the better results you'll get, right? I think sometimes you'll hear people say, well, it's creating junk. Well, you're also creating junk prompts. Like you got to, like, the more detail you give it, it's just like a consider it. I've heard people talk about them being digital employees or interns. And I really like that concept, because if you have an intern, they're great, but they need a lot of direction. And so I think if you give it more direction, then sometimes we're lazy, We just wanted to do the
Mm-hmm.
work. That's really powerful. The other one is just a tool to check out if you want to blow your mind. Okay.
Oh,
I think it's gamma.app. I'm doing this from memory.
okay.
I don't think it's gamma.io. It's one of those two. GAMMA. I think it's .app. It creates presentations for you with a 1-sentence prompt. It
Yeah, I remember you
is
showing this to me.
wacky. Like I did a presentation for our local chamber of commerce, and live while I'm standing in front of them, I did the whole presentation, and then I was like, okay, let's take suggestions. We got a suggestion from the audience. I typed in 1 sentence, hit enter, and it created a PowerPoint for an entire presentation. It created an outline, created the graphics, and everybody was just like
Mm-hmm.
mouth wide open, right? It was,
Yeah,
and so anyway, that's just a tool that I don't use that every day, but I'm like, this is
that
what's
is a cool
coming,
one.
folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So cool.
Cool. So we're going to go back to Dad was right, Dad was wrong. And I think we've decided, I don't know that I'm doing these for forever. So I hope you all enjoy them while they're here because I'm running low. It is a fight every time. Today we're going Dad was right. And this one fell on par, specifically because we were talking about some of the tough love advice you've gotten kind of things. One of the things my dad has said my whole life. And he used to say it at the worst timing where it would send you right over the edge. So it's also important to note that you'd be frustrated and he'd be like, well, honey, life's about choices. And I hate it. He's right, but I hate it because you'd be standing there mad as can be and he'd hit you with that. But he does have a good point. Life is all about choices, and you can probably even talk more on it than I can, but you make a choice and go, well, that was really stupid. That's where we're at. That's okay. Let's move on with our lives. And that's one that I hated telling you were right, especially hearing it as a teenager in the car as you were driving me to school.
Yeah.
But you were probably onto something.
Yeah, no, and hey, I think that I heard somebody say one time, I think it was Jim Gaffigan, the comedian, and he said that parents are like fortune tellers that are always right and never listen to. It's like, hey, honey, I think you're going to need a coat. I don't need a coat. And then 5 minutes later, Daddy, I'm cold. Can I have your coat? So I think that that's one of those things that I say that because I know life's about choices because of poor choices I have made.
Fair.
Right?
That's
like,
fair. Yeah.
And so I know it to be true because when I've made good choices in my life, I usually ended up on the right side of stuff. And when I made poor choices, I joke about it. Like several of my friends would know this. If you listen to this podcast, I enjoy a cold beverage, a beer. That's probably my favorite thing, right? And so there are times in your life where you will have more than you should, maybe.
Very seldom.
Yeah, but
for me,
I have. And so we'll be at an event like a golf outing or whatever, and somebody will be like, "Do you want some ibuprofen or something?" I'm like, "Nope, I earned this. Life's about choices. I'm gonna remember this."
He has said this my whole life. Actually, it was funny because my sister Skylar was helping me come up with some topics, and I was like, "Okay, what's some shit Dad said all the time?" And she goes, "Life's about choices." She also hit me with a case of the 4 Ps.
Oh, that's a good one.
If you don't know, case of the 4 Ps is piss poor prior planning. He hit us with that a lot. Also, worst timing is when he'd hit you with it, when you did forget your coat, but you didn't want to admit it, and you'd be like this. And not admitting it, and Dad goes, "You know what that sounds like? Cake to 4 Ps." And you continue on with your night because you're just like, mother, father. But yeah, so that's where you were right today, is that life is about choices. I might still make the wrong ones, but I'm rolling with it.
Yeah, you and me both. All right, well, that's a good one. Okay, cool. Well, that was fun. This was the most fun Dad was right I can remember in a while. So
okay, good. I'm so glad.
Okay, so time for a shout out. I just want to give a shout out to actually a couple of organizations in our community. The Coshocton Chamber of Commerce is doing an event, and they partner with Coshocton Regional Medical Center to do a health, safety, and wellness expo every year. It's been going on for a bunch of years now, and they do there's different blood testing, different health tests. There's lots of great vendors that are there. It's really well attended. It's actually at the community room in our community. Definitely worth checking out. It's at 637 Chestnut Street if you want. The date is Saturday, March 15th from 8 a.m. to noon. I love events like this because I think it's one of those where it's just good for the community, and it'll end up being good for businesses and things like that, which is great. But I've had my blood work done at this event. They do discount, like the CRMC will do discounted blood draws and things like that, where it's like, man, what a great resource for the community. And I appreciate them putting that on. So I think they're still looking for vendors if you are local or regional and you want to jump in. But at the end of the day, on March 15th, it is an event worth attending. So thank you to everybody who puts it on. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, Jade, thank you so much. I appreciate you making the choice to jump on here today. And that was a good choice. It was a good choice for the most part. And
sorry, did you see my eyes rolling to the back of my head, or did you miss that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, but those who are listening on the podcast, they couldn't see it, so I appreciate you.
I was just making sure everybody got to see, to hear the eye roll, see the eye roll.
Yeah, for sure. But if you are listening, we do appreciate that. If you have anybody you want us to shout out, let us know that for sure. As we mentioned, if you have advice that you've heard that kind of hit you, love to hear that as well. And hey, if you want to learn more about Hasseman Marketing, we'd love for you to do that. Just go ahead to hassemanmarketing.com. We are a merch and marketing company, and we'd love to help you elevate both sides of that. So on behalf of Jade, thanks so much for listening.
Signing out.